Remo?
Dear MVA members, dear friends from SRI, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar organized by the Cultural Considerations Working Group of the Moon Village Association with the collaboration of Space Renaissance International. I am Remo Rapetti, co-chair of the working group. The topic of today deals with human behavior vis-à-vis the new experiences that landing again on the moon, establishing scientific and commercial bases there, opening up to the deep space that will be at hand from the hidden face of our satellite, and finally moving forward toward Mars and beyond, will offer to humanity. Will this change our perception of space, our religious beliefs, our social relationships with the rest of the world? The overview effect, discovered by Frank White in 1987, has indeed fostered pacifist and environmentalist movements, for example. But the same Frank, through the astronauts' testimonies, recently perceived also the appearance of a universal feeling that he has called the universal insight, and that can be the beginning of a new vision of cosmos. Tonight we want to investigate on these possible developments, and to do that we have invited three outstanding scholars. Frank White, who is the father of the overview effect and the universal insight, and whose books, The Overview Effect and the Cosma Hypothesis, are milestones of the history of space philosophy. Anahita Nezami, space psychologist, who in her writings often focused on space health and the overview effect, and also on individual, societal, and planetary well-being, neuroscience, stress and trauma, performance, and altered states of consciousness. And Marie-Louise Heuser, a German space philosopher and author, founder and executive director of the Society for Space Culture, and head of the Space Philosophy Laboratory of the Space Renaissance Academy. But now I would like to ask Giuseppe Ribaldi, MVA President, and Adriana Utino, SRI former President, to say a few words of welcome on the occasion of this first act of collaboration between the two organizations. Giuseppe, please, over to you.
Okay, so thank you. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone, hopefully around the world. So thank you for having Remo and of course all the other people which have made this possible. Thank you for the organization. This is indeed an important webinar. Both organizations, Space Renaissance International and us, are organizing regularly webinar, but I think this is the first, I would say, official joint webinar after we have signed the MOU. So I'm extremely pleased of the start of this collaboration. Even more because this team is very dear personally to myself, because when the Chinese landed on the dark side of the moon, as it is called, in 2019, and by the way, the Chang'e 4 mission is basically still operating the Yutu-2 rover after 4 years. It was the first time that a man-made, human-made, better, spacecraft, it landed in a place where nobody would ever see again Earth. And this is the loneliest place, probably, certainly in the solar system, because you could not physically see the Earth. And this is actually what has triggered the start, at least from our side within MVA, the consideration that when you are on the dark side of the moon, you are facing the outer space, and you cannot ever see Earth. So therefore, I think this has been the trigger for this consideration. I have been discussing with our Chinese colleague, and I invited them to participate in exploring the implication of their mission. And I have to say that they are interested to do so. However, we didn't manage to get them in this first meeting, but I really hope that this is the first of a series of activity, which probably will need to continue to explore, starting from this realization of a spacecraft landing on the other side of the moon. What are the implications from the cultural side that we are going to see today? So I really wish everyone a good workshop. Thank you, of course, to the speaker. And as I said, just to conclude, this is for us the first step of an in-depth assessment of the deep space effect, which is, if you like, the complementary to the overview effect, because the overview effect, you see the Earth, and this one, you do not see the Earth. So it is the yang and yin, whatever you like to call it, is a full complementary vision of, and what we have to understand, while the overview effect has got a lot of data, we do not have hardly any data, because there has never been anyone which has seen only the Earth, except for the astronaut, which went around the moon, and for a few hours, for a few minutes, every orbit, they have been facing this situation. So with that, thank you so much again, and I leave the floor back, I guess, to Adriano for SRI. Please, Adriano.
Oh, we cannot hear you.
I think you are muted, Adriano.
True. Okay. Can
Yes.
you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So very welcome everybody to this first webinar in collaboration between Space Renaissance International and the Moon Village Association. We signed an agreement, a collaboration agreement among our two organizations, and I think this is only the first step. As Giuseppe said, we will make other things together, including maybe an event in Europe this year. If we are able to to organize it, we will do it. Okay. However, the subject of the today webinar is very, very interesting, because it's the deep space effect. That is as Giuseppe said, the synergistic view, considering the overview effect that we can enjoy, the astronauts so far and the few tourists so far enjoyed looking at Earth from space. Now, what I just want to say is that the deep space, looking at the deep space outside, we can see the majesty and the mystery of the universe. We can see the stars in a very much clear way with respect to what we can see from Earth, because we have the atmosphere in the middle. And most of all, I think that okay, what? Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
What I think is very much important is the change in our mentality that will be brought by looking outside. It will be what I call the 3D view, because here on the bottom of Earth, we have a flat view in 2 dimensions, but when we will be there, our mind will be allowed to think in a 3D space. And this effect will be very much important for our culture, for the evolution of our culture, of our thought, of our arts, our engineering, our business, everything. We should be prepared to a complete change of our way of thinking when we will live and work over there. So I think this is something we should maybe try to understand, even if it's very difficult because we are not there yet. So, okay, let's hope and work because we can, so that we can be there as soon as possible. Okay, this is my wish to all humanity. Okay, so I give you back the floor.
Thank you, Adriano. And now let's go down to the key presentations. After them, there will be a Q&A session run by Arthur Woods, co-chair of the Cultural Consideration Working Group. And finally, Adriano Utino will draw the conclusions of this debate. Frank White will start with a paper about the universal insight and the deep space effect. Frank, the floor is yours.
Remo, thank you so very much. And I'm just delighted to be in such distinguished company. And this is a really exciting topic. I'm going to try to stay within 20 minutes, but I'm just telling you it's going to be hard because I'm already getting a lot of ideas that I didn't even have when I showed up today. So hopefully we can reconvene another time. What I'm going to try to do is relate the overview effect and universal insight to the deep space effect. The first two terms I coined. I regret to say I don't know who coined deep space effect, but congratulations. Okay, Giuseppe, good job. And we don't know a lot about the deep space effect, as was noted. I'll try to tell you what maybe it's all about from the research that's been done on the overview effect and the universal insight. So let me pull up my PowerPoint. All right, let's try to do something here. Okay, can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, here we go. All right, let's start with the overview effect and the universal insight. I have said before, I don't know what I think until I write a book, and that's why I write so many books. And when I was writing the first edition of the overview effect, one of the first ideas I had is that space exploration transforms human consciousness. And that is a really important realization. And it's also important to realize that the overview effect was really an early stage in that transformation. The farther out we go, the more our consciousness will change, the more our identity will change. And I did coin two other terms. One is Copernican perspective, and the other was the universal insight. Edgar Mitchell was the catalyst for the idea of the universal insight. And I'll say a bit about that in a minute, but essentially the overview effect is a realization that the Earth is a whole system, interconnected and interrelated, and we are just a part of it, we humans. Now, the Copernican perspective has not gotten a lot of attention, but that is really an understanding that the Earth is part of yet another whole system, and that's the solar ecosystem. And people have said to me, well, when you go to Mars, are you going to experience the overview effect? And I've said, no, not exactly, because when you see the Earth from orbit or the near side of the moon, you still see a planet with oceans and continents. For Mars, it's going to be more like a point of light. And then the universal insight is a connection to the universe and feeling that you're a part of that. Edgar Mitchell, on the way home from the moon with Apollo 14, had an epiphany. I'll just read it to you here. It was an explosion of awareness, an aha, a wow. It was apparently what a religious person would call a revelation. He came to realize that the universe is made up of spirit and matter, but they are not separate. The bridge is consciousness. God is something like a universal consciousness manifest in each individual, and the route to divine reality and to a more satisfying human material reality is through human consciousness. Whether you relate to his realization or not, what's important is it was about the universe. And I felt as I looked at it and I talked to him, he had actually experienced something beyond the overview effect per se. And that's why I coined the term universal insight. And eventually, I really came to understand after really the third edition of the overview effect, hey, wait a minute, even the orbital astronauts, they not only see the Earth from space, but in space. And, you know, it is really important to understand that. And so I think we should take note of the fact, hang on just a minute. Yes, okay, I'm on the right slide. It's important to understand, and it took me a long time to get it. It's more profound when you go to the moon, but even in low Earth orbit, you can look beyond the Earth out into the universe in a unique way. And so that was really what led me to start thinking more about Cosma and the Cosma hypothesis. And that's what led me to this question of why has evolution, cosmic evolution, brought us to the point where we can do this, where we can have this experience, not just for ourselves, but what are we bringing to the cosmos that's valuable? I want to show you a couple of videos because I feel like the best way to really understand the astronaut experience is to hear from them. And I went to Johnson Space Center in 2019. I interviewed a total of 10 astronauts, and that began an entire series that NASA put together called Down to Earth. And this is Tracy Caldwell Dyson. In the beginning, she really talks about seeing the Earth, but toward the end, she starts to talk about looking beyond and looking out into the universe. And I believe it's a hint of the deep space effect.
My first look at the Earth from that vantage point was on Ascent in my wrist mirror, looking at the aft window behind me, knowing that I was the first one that had to get out of their seat and film our external tank falling away. That was my first job, aside from all the monitoring that I had to do. And so my view of it was very fleeting and very technical. It was background to the task that I had at hand, and that was pointing a camera at an external tank so that it could be analyzed. Then when we got into orbit, we had a very fast-paced mission, which all space shuttle missions were. You had 10 to 12 days of fast-paced work. And it was my commander, Scott Kelly, who carved out 90 minutes of entire orbit on flight day 10 And he said to the rookies, the three of us, I want you guys all in that window. And I don't want you to move. And he already pre-coordinated it, got the lights turned off on the station so we could see everything in its grandeur. And that was the first moment that I had to really soak it in and discovered a lot of things about my reaction to that view in that relatively short period of time. And then, of course, there was my space station flight where I lived up there for 6 months. And every night that I could, I was planted in that cupola, much like the picture shows, and gazing at it. And there wasn't a single regret I had about the time I spent there. In fact, it almost, I dare say, grieved me to think about how in the world am I going to describe this? There's no words. There's no picture I could take to do it justice. There's no watercolors that I could put on paper to come close to the vividness, the ever-changing picture that I see staring at this planet. Everything from the colors to what changes the atmosphere goes through, depending on where the sun angle is and whether the moon's in the view or not, to just how fast we're going over the surface of it and the way shadows are changing. You can see the same landmass over a period of 2 weeks and it looks completely different because of that. To then looking at the stars and blackness, a black that nothing here on Earth ever can replicate. And then you look at the space station around you and all the people who are a part of this structure that are, I know, either at their desks, creating the next great marvel, or they're sitting in mission control, controlling everything. And that's where it kind of hits you. You are but a small fraction of the human race that will ever get to see this the way it is right now.
So I think that's really a good emotional sense of the overview effect in its purest form, that is seeing the Earth as a whole system where everything is connected and related. But then there's a hint of the universal insight of the deep space effect. Tracy told me too that she could see depth in the stars and realize some were further away than others. She could see colors. She began to see the universe in a way that she had not seen it before. I talked to Edgar Mitchell about being in orbit or going to the moon, and he said, going to the moon gets you closer to a more universal experience because of the distance and wider view. You identify more with the universe as it is instead of the Earth as it is. And this is profound. I mean, a lot of people don't realize the difference. Low Earth orbit, 220 miles away. The moon, 240,000 miles away. The further out we go, the more we change. Ed Gibson said, you see the sun against that black sky and realize it's just one of the stars. You have an appreciation for what we have here on Earth and for what may be possible out in the universe. That's a hint of the deep space effect, I think. He also said, it diminishes your worry about things. You see that what you're worried about and anxious about, it's not that big a deal in the grand scheme of things. A few more quotes. Al Sacco Jr. said, you see that the Earth is just a small part of a large universe, and you have a feeling that's hard to describe. He also told me that there's something called the astronaut's secret, and all the astronauts know it, and that is, we're not just citizens of even the Earth, we are citizens of the universe. Sandy Magnus talked about how as a child, a teenager, she used to try to look up and look into the sky and try to imagine the vastness and the size of the universe. But it's just too mind-blowing to realize the light you're looking at has traveled for millions and billions of years. And some astronauts, when they talk about the universal insight or how they feel about the universe, they say, we're small, we're insignificant. But Nicole Stott said, we may be small in the grand scale of the universe, but from the standpoint of significance, I think in terms of, here's this planet placed at a specific distance from the sun that allows us to live as we do, and it created this environment that's a perfect place for us to survive. Again, this begins to point to, why are we here? What is our role? What is our place in the universe? John Harrington, who's the first member of an enrolled Native American tribe to go into orbit, talked about his spacewalk and said, that was the, oh, gee whiz moment of my spacewalk. There is nothing between me and whatever exists in the universe. And here's another one of these beautiful short pieces from Down to Earth called, I love the title, Swimming in the Universe. It's Mike Fossum. He was very much into the overview effect, into astronomy, even before he flew. And I love this idea of swimming in the universe.
I've taught astronomy to Boy Scouts for most of my adult life and know the summer stars in particular like the back of my hand. And I've sought out, I've lived in the Mojave Desert for 8 years, and I would go away from the lights there, even as meager as they might be, to lay on top of a car and just swim, in the universe. So I've always loved the night sky and the stars. And so on my very first shuttle flight, both of my shuttle flights, we took some time. I convinced my crew to turn off all the light in the cockpit, let our eyes dark adapt, and just sit there perched in the windows. All of us were in different windows, and you could see, the Milky Way is just stunning. Of course, the lights don't flicker, they're steady, because they're not coming through the dust and coming through the atmosphere. As you really adjust, you start to sense the very subtle colors that are in the stars, a little bit of reddish, a little bit of bluish, blue-white. And that was, really neat for me to see. The space shuttle was incredibly busy, though, and you don't get much time to look out the windows. It was having the downtime. So you work really hard. The Monday through Friday was a blur. Working late, you're living at work. There's always more to do. And then weekends, it slows down some. There's some work. You work out, have a video conference with the family. But you do have some time for some projects and for looking out the windows. And I really got into low light photography in particular. The cupola was fairly new. We had some fairly new cameras, the D3 that was good at capturing low light imagery. I was up there during the last space shuttle mission. So it's just 135. Atlantis was docked to the space station. And I grabbed Sandy Magnus, a good friend of mine, and she was on that crew. And she had lived on the space station a few years before, but the cupola was new since she was there. All they had was single windows that looked straight down. And there you're just watching the Earth go by at 5 miles a second. You haven't looked out the cupola yet. Come on, come with me. I've got so much to do. No, Sandy, you have got to see this. So we went in there, cranked the shutters open, and we were flying into this astonishing aurora australis, southern lights. This rippling, pulsing river of green that's down below us, the red that is stretching up to our altitude. It's like, it was just breathtaking. And I had not practiced any low light photography up to that point, but I knew right then that I had to figure out how to capture this. And so I started working on that. I called the photography experts on the ground and said, okay, what are the settings I used to get started with this? And part of it was experimental. I had to get close and then start trying. I got some pictures actually of Atlantis docked to the space station in the night with a little bit of the green aurora off to the side. And then I got a picture of Atlantis's plasma trail as it came in over the Yucatan, headed toward its landing in Florida. And it's just fascinating. The more you look, the more you start to see the stars like you have never seen them before. I'd give a lot to see that view again.
So I bet Mike Fossum would love to be on the other side of the moon. He obviously touched on the deep space effect as much as he could from Earth and from orbit, but obviously he could really swim in the universe if he got onto the other side of the moon. So this led to the Cosmo hypothesis, and Edgar Mitchell felt a unity with the universe. He really almost left his body, you might say, and others had similar experiences, though maybe not quite so powerful. And it does ask the question, why has cosmic evolution on this planet after 4.5 billion years brought forth humanity? And what is our purpose? And in writing that book, it seemed to me, well, Cosma, which is my name for the universe, Cosma is alive, it's intelligent, it's self-aware, in part because of us. It's not a dead thing. The universe is alive. And maybe it's our role to bring life, intelligence, and self-awareness to other parts of the universe. Maybe in a symbiotic relationship where we look at the universe not in terms of just what we can take from it and how we can exploit it, but what we can give. And I'm hopeful this will be part of a new philosophy of space exploration, so that we look at what we're doing in a collaborative way with what is out there. And I believe that, you know, people living on the other side of the moon will definitely get that sense. What is the cultural impact? Well, I don't have time to say everything I'd like to say, but I think space-based cultures are going to evolve very unpredictably. Just think about it. Here we have, not far from Earth, the possibility of inners and outers, the people on the near side of the moon and the people on the far side of the moon. Those who can see the Earth all the time and maybe are entranced by it, and those who can't, and they see the stars all the time. That lays the foundation for different cultures, different identities. There are many cultures on Earth, and there will be many cultures in the solar ecosystem and beyond. I should mention another phrase that's interesting. Deanna Weibel has coined the term ultra view effect, and that really has to do with looking out into the universe and looking at the cosmos. I will note quickly that I've interviewed several Blue Origin astronauts who've been on very short suborbital hops, and many of them comment as much about the blackness of space and their perception of the universe as they do about the Earth. As we evolve outward, there is the possibility of speciation, of actually an evolution of a new species adapted to that environment. Homo spatiens, as I call them. Artificial intelligence is going to play a role, and so will extraterrestrial intelligence if we make contact. But we're moving from a finite game confined to one planet to an infinite game. Those people on the far side of the moon are going to be staring into infinity all the time. I can't believe their consciousness is not going to be dramatically different from ours. What is going to unify all of this? Well, I don't have time to give you all the details, but I have co-founded the Human Space Program as a central project for humanity to explore the universe. And I'm hoping it will become a unifying force for all this dramatic evolution and change. I think the deep space effect and universal insight might be the same phenomenon. But one thing I know is talking to people who've had the experience is the best way to find out about that experience. And whatever we call it, we do know that space exploration transforms our consciousness, changes our identity, and helps us to evolve. And the farther we migrate outward, the more we are going to evolve. And we don't think about it too much, but the more the universe will evolve. That's exciting for me. I hope it's exciting for you. And knowing who's here today, I think I can say that it is. So I would conclude by saying, let's get on with it. Let's have these experiences ourselves, and let's invite humanity to the excitement of large-scale space migration. Thank you very much. It's been great to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank, for this very profound and exciting presentation. And now I'll give the floor to Anahita Nezami. Welcome, Anahita. She will talk about going boldly where no human has gone before, the impact of space exploration and habitation on human psychology and the well-being ecosystems required to support this transition. Anahita, over to you.
Thank you so much, Remo. It's fantastic to be here with you all, and thank you for inviting me to participate. I'm just going to share my screen and just bear with me while I do this. There we are. Okay, can you just confirm that you can see the portion of the screen that you need to see?
Yes, yes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I'm Anahita Nezami. I'm a psychologist, and I'm the founder of Earthscape VR. I have a keen interest in space exploration and how the human mind and body will adapt to our journeys beyond the ISS, to the moon, Mars, perhaps Venus. And today I'm going to be talking about going boldly where no human has gone before, and trying to explore the really some of the practical challenges of space exploration and habitation on human psychology and well-being. It'll be quite a quick pit stop at this juncture. I'm sure many of you have an idea of some of those challenges. And then I'll be moving on to explore some of the consequences and potential impact on identity and consciousness. So we have this sort of image before you shows what potentially the future of space exploration might look like. It depicts some of the ventures that people are working on currently. And the first space age and the ISS experiment led to the creation of surveillance, medical, agricultural, and computing products, and systems that have excelled human capabilities to nourish, protect, and care for the inhabitants of Earth, vastly improving the quality of life for us all. Now, more recently with Space Age 2, we faced the democratization of space, where we could witness humankind return to the moon with the Artemis programs, journey into deep space, and eventually live and work on other celestial bodies and regions in the solar system. The human psyche and body has, of course, evolved over millions of years with the primary purpose of adapting and acclimating to conditions here on Earth. And the formation of tribal communities and later civilizations and all of the cultural and societal rituals, norms, and laws that followed developed out of the necessities and needs that arose from our terrestrial habitat. So looking ahead, it will be important to try to consider what aspects of existing terrestrial practices and rituals serve us on our journey out into the cosmos, but also consider other novel systems and strategies to implement that will take into account the environment and living conditions of our new world at the same time considering some of the limitations and challenges of extraterrestrial living. And of course, all of these infrastructures, practices, and rituals that we implement early on will affect our culture, will affect our identity, will affect how we relate to one another as well. So long duration space travel and building longer term space communities, of course, present many challenges, as I just mentioned, to be identified and addressed before we can seriously embark on setting up permanent space settlements and communities. But they also present opportunities in terms of considering the next frontier of human exploration, development, and expansion. In order to grasp the potential impact of human exploration and human habitation programs on culture and society and devise effective well-being ecosystems that support crew well-being and promote overall mission success, it will be important to map out and envisage the different stages of habitation, from the construction of these early primitive sites to development of more complex community systems and infrastructure, exploring along the way the needs and requirements of dwellers and how each phase will impact and shape our individual and collective psychology, identity, and consciousness. And that's important to bear in mind because, as I said, the early primitive efforts or structures that are made will be substantially different. Our reaction and responses to that will be different to once we have, 1,000 years ahead and built, mega satellites and space elevators, for example. So I'm just going to quickly talk about some of these images. What will the future of space expansion actually look like and feel like? Well, one of the images, image one, I think actually I've got the images the wrong way around, but anyway, one of the images with the Martian landscapes, a group of Finnish researchers proposed the permanent human habitation, that is image one, mega satellite structure. Basically, it involves a number of smaller spinning satellites attached to each other, which create this massive disc-shaped mega satellite. The vessel is meant to orbit Ceres, a dwarf planet in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Artificial gravity is also created that is similar to that of Earth's. And apparently Ceres is a prime location because it has nitrogen, which could enable the creation of Earth-like atmosphere. Illustration 2 shows us a 3D printed modular habitat on Mars by Foster and Partners for a NASA-backed competition. I think it was in 2015. The construction relies on a robust, pre-programmed, semi-autonomous 3D printed dwelling for up to 4 astronauts, erected prior to the arrival of the astronauts or the spacefarers, and is constructed using materials from Martian landscapes. Image 3 is very sort of exciting, but also perhaps many years ahead, is an interplanetary superhighway. This was envisaged by Caliph Pasadona, engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and the system was conceived by Martin Lowe. It's a free highway through the solar system, resembling a vast array of virtual winding tunnels and conduits, and it's around the sun and the planets. And it can slash the amount of fuel apparently needed for future space missions as we travel outwards into the cosmos. Now, the superhighway, I was excited to learn that the superhighway software was used to help design the flight path for NASA's Genesis mission. So it's actually being implemented as we speak. Of course, there's also discussions about space agriculture and farming, and as well as moving heavy or harmful construction activities from the Earth. I know that that's a controversial topic, but it's one that is that has been disputed and debated for a long time. And finally, space elevators. A space elevator will be apparently mankind's first planetary scale structure that will see that will help massive cargo to be delivered out of the planet in an inexpensive and environmentally neutral way. So this gives us a glimpse into 1,000 years ahead of what it might look like, and how then we need to differentiate between changes, how space travel might impact us in the immediate future compared to 1,000 or 10,000 years ahead, or 300 years ahead, or 200 years ahead. So early human missions to the moon and Mars will be a microcosm of larger scale migration and space community missions. The knowledge we gain from these missions, the primitive communities we develop, and the infrastructures we build will help us develop a more comprehensive understanding of what off-world, more complex communities might look like and feel like, and what their needs will be. So really, apart from the ISS experiments and obviously all the wonderful Apollo missions and all the other sort of work we've done on analogs, it will be important for us to take that leap to really try to work out some of the needs, the fundamental needs beyond the survival needs. So what might communities and settlements look like off-world? Lagrange, Martian, lunar communities. So this image just depicts, some of these are sort of made up ideas, but they do depict how long it might take for us to set things up. And 10 years, for example, in 10 years or within 10 years or more, simple structures might be erected that resemble primitive communities. Simple inflatable biodomes might be set up on extraterrestrial landscapes, and ancient artifacts might, or artifacts that resemble existing ancient artifacts might come about. 500 to 100 years or more, we might have erection of simple biodome towns and Martian lunar landscapes, or on Martian lunar landscapes, and the formation of a simple Gerard O'Neill cylinders or structures at Lagrange points. 500 to 1,000 years might have the construction of fully formed Martian and lunar towns and cities, potentially including biodomes, more complex biodomes, underground dwellings, and high rises if we opt for the high rises. Although, to be honest, I think they're considering different types of structures at the moment. 1,000 to 10,000 years, we might have the formation of complex Gerard O'Neill cylinder settlements built using, as Gerard O'Neill points out, materials extracted from the moon or asteroids. And we might be having conversations or drawing closer to terraforming celestial bodies and establishing an interplanetary superhighway and space elevators at other destinations apart from Earth. And again, the terraforming idea is quite controversial, but it is there are serious discussions about that. So initially, we will be very reliant on the space vessels that we go out on, and they will play a central role, not only maintaining the safety of the crew on these unprecedented missions, but in recent times, therefore more recent times, has been paid to creating vessels that can promote comfort and optimize well-being. On the screen, you have a series of images from Boeing, Blue Origin, Space Perspectives, NASA, SpaceX, Starship, Axiom, that depict how many passengers approximately each vessel can carry. And of course, going back to earlier missions of Apollo and before, 3 was the maximum that people that could be carried on any vessel. So that poses, apart from Starship with the 100+ potential people and cargo, that poses some challenges to how many people we can initially take out to extra planetary surfaces and how quickly we can get them there. But I do know that there are some people working on this problem right now. And of course, there's different mission types. So we have different aims at the moment with ISS experiments and Axiom, who've, joining ISS and they're taking crew onto the ISS, a commercial crew, but also I think they'll be taking over ISS experiments at some stage. Commercial space flights. We have moon missions with NASA's Artemis mission being is well underway. To consider moon construction and exploration of the cosmos, but as well as preparing the landscape for future Mars missions. And we also have other celestial journeys planned to potentially Venus, Ceres, Jupiter, moons. These are preliminary plans, but people are having serious discussions. And of course, Mars missions for long duration and habitation programs to Mars, which might involve one day having Earthlings migrate to live and settle in on Mars, eventually then becoming interplanetary species. Mission lengths, well, how long will we go out? Will it be permanent at first? Probably not. At first, we might just send people out to set camps up and see how that goes and bring them hopefully home to tell us more about it. but a Mars round trip will take at a minimum 14 months, which is like a flyby. And a Mars landing trip might take 14 months there and back in best case scenario, but 18 months maybe on Mars, so around 900 days. So under 3 years. And Moon flyby, 3 days to the Moon, landing 4 to 7, and Venus flyby 3 months. So again, thinking about that time frame and initial journeys out, and again thinking about how the vessel will be such an important part of those initial sort of efforts to establish a community. Crew composition, how many crew members can the space vessel carry to form the first members of off-world community, which we've talked about. And we've talked about Space Age 1 with the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo missions, each having 1, 2, or 3 people on board each vessel. And of course, that's only expanded to a few more apart from the Starship by SpaceX. So as it stands, and based on spaceflight and analog evidence, the average incidence rates of an adverse behavioral health event occurring during space missions is relatively low. While mood and anxiety disturbances occur, no behavioral emergencies have been reported to date on, ISS experiments. And we do have some anecdotal and empirical evidence indicating the likelihood of an adverse cognitive or behavioral condition or psychiatric disorder occurring greatly increases on deep space missions and with the length of a mission. So the longer you're out there, the more likely you will experience these issues, particularly if there aren't the effective countermeasures in place and training and vetting procedures. So in establishing a community, an off-world community, these things will have to be considered. Being in a dangerous environment in an enclosed space with a small group of people for long periods of time can result in psychological and other health-related issues. We only have to look at COVID to understand how that can affect, well-adjusted groups. So it'd be important to just have countermeasures to counteract that. There will be also many environmental issues that spacefarers and astronauts will face, living in a semi-mechanical environment for long periods of time, which will be very different to Earth's green and blue habitat. It'll be a hostile environment, so risk and danger, existential issues may come up, especially on longer-term missions and habitation programs. Of course, there's microgravity to contend with. Let's say on Martian environments, it's 38% of gravity on Earth, and on the Moon, it's 17% of Earth's gravity. So we will need to learn how to adapt to our senses and our body to these new environments, particularly on the outbound journey. I do know that there are people trying to address the microgravity situation, but as it stands, we would have to contend with that. So the repercussions of that may be effects on body language, tiredness, communication, and all the rest of it. High levels of radiation, thin and dry atmosphere, extreme temperature fluctuations. It's minus 81 degrees Fahrenheit, so very cold on Martian landscapes. Space dust and chemical hazards. I'm not going to read through all of them, but really there is so many environmental challenges that we need to work on overcoming, and people and engineers and scientists are already working on in order to effectively create habitation programs. So anticipated challenges of spaceflight actually fall into environmental and physiological. Environmental, I just read a few of the challenges. There are many more. Behavioral and performance, interpersonal and psychiatric. And we have different ways of trying to understand some of the behavioral performance, interpersonal and psychiatric challenges. And of course, the ISS research and the experiments have provided a very important glimpse into an evidence of how people are affected in semi-sterile environments, isolated environments. And we have a bunch of analog stations in the image before you that show you certain analog stations that also do testing for isolated and confined environments. And of course, we had the famous ISS NASA twin study, a twin-based approach to central space-related questions that include genetic controls that had never actually been undertaken before. So all of these findings have helped us glean some insight into what actually will happen when we go out further than we've ever journeyed before. Although again, I think we will fully find out when we actually take the leap and do these longer term or permanent missions. And they are vast. I'm not going to read all of them, but these experiments and studies have shown us that there are disruptions to circadian rhythm and sleep. Astronauts lose 2 hours of sleep on the ISS. There's fluid shifts in cranial pressure, which means brain swelling and swelling in the face, which can affect thinking and seeing. There's people develop skin sensitivities in microgravity environments, and perhaps perception of pain might be heightened. Some studies have found men testosterone drops in microgravity. So there has been also suggestions of neurodegeneration, muscle atrophy, bone degeneration. All of these things, altered immune system, that need to be accounted for. And perhaps one of the very important ones is altered gene expression, which came about from the twins, the Kelly twins experiments and studies. So it could affect our DNA and gene expression, which is important. It can also speed up the aging process as well. So there are a lot of issues and challenges to go through in terms of how we cope. And some of the notable experiments on analogs have included the Mars 500 mission, as well as the Sirius missions, and some of the NASA analogs as well. So they do bed rest missions as well. And of course, if you go way back to the Biosphere 1 experiment, the team there experienced quite a number of interpersonal issues and conflicts, and there was divisions between crew members. But one of the things that was interesting from that study, one of the things that cemented the team together, was the botanical and gardening activities and maintaining the environment of the biodome in the biosphere. Which really brought the team together, which I think is an interesting finding in us trying to come up with countermeasures to help future spacefarers. So I think I've sort of highlighted some of the main results, and I'm going to go on to, otherwise I won't be able to talk about some of the other issues. So how do the environmental and physiological conditions of space missions affect the mental health of spacefarers, which is really the area I specialize in? So NASA's Behavioral Health and Performance Division differentiates between an adverse behavioral condition and a psychiatric disorder. And so the psychological health of the crew can be conceptualized as being on a continuum. On the one end is the possibility of adverse cognitive and behavioral conditions arising as a result of factors associated with human space exploration and prolonged stress. On the other end, or more serious health conditions can develop if the adverse environmental stresses and cognitive or behavioral conditions are not detected or mitigated early on. So all of us are really moving on this continuum of health and illness, in the sense of psychiatric illness, all the time. And stresses environment may push us one way or the other. And it will be the same for spacefarers. Psychological symptoms can manifest in various ways. So they might involve acute disturbances, oscillations in mood, irritability, low mood, despondency, indifference. There may be visual illusions on these future flights I'm talking about, and missions. Visual illusions and uniformed pseudo illusions. People may experience dissociation, grief, displacement and homesickness, fatigue, emotional suppression, deviant behavior may also come about. Psychosomatic issues, so fibromyalgia, recurring migraines, infections to do with immune system. And learned helplessness. So we'll talk about that in a few slides, how people can respond to learned helplessness, but the effects caused by uncontrollability of events that are beyond the organism's control in any situation can elicit learned helplessness and can send us into an automated response of freeze, fight if we think we have a chance of doing something, the fight response if we think that there is a chance of us overcoming that issue, but also freeze, which means withdrawing, and not being responsive and isolating oneself. Now, that's just the sort of acute disturbances that may occur, but there may also be risk of pervasive psychiatric disorders developing if those acute disturbances aren't mitigated. So if prolonged stress is continues, then there may be the formation of psychotic symptoms, formed hallucination, paranoia. And again, this will be compounded by the fact that there will be a lack of sensory stimuli, potentially, or perhaps different stimuli to what our senses are used to on Earth-based settings. And so the brain overcompensates and fills in the regions that are inactive are sort of the regions that are inactive are remain dormant, but then other regions overcompensate for that area. So, and again, in dream states, for example, one study has suggested that that's what the brain is doing when we are dreaming and we visualize things, because our eyes aren't being used in that, they're not open. The dream world is helping us, that brain region, to remain active. Maybe mood or anxiety disorders, so social anxiety, they're all anxiety disorders are all based in fear. So some sort of a sense of fear. And so social anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, and all of these kinds of anxiety disorders, health anxiety, phobias, claustrophobia, agoraphobia, adjustment disorders, complex grief, and perhaps a return of break-off syndromes. So anxiety, spatial disorientation, euphoria, dread, and dissociation. So we need to develop ways to predict, identify and deal with the environmental, physiological, behavioral, and interpersonal issues that may arise on future missions. And we need to develop protocols and applications that can help detect the presence or absence of symptoms in the mind, body, and behavior, as well as development of well-being ecosystems that can mitigate adverse responses or conditions. And this would have to be done in a way that is not too intrusive. So we have a lot on our hands to do, certainly for those earlier missions. So again, crew composition, I'm going to skip past this and go over it quickly because I want to get to the other slides. But how many people actually travel out across at any one time will be important. Is it going to be 4, 6, 100 for these habitation programs particularly? Will multiple spore groups be sent out? I have more questions than answers. What is the healthy number of crew members? Human relations are based on smaller group relationships. So potentially locally based on our evolutionary past, locally over planetary, although we may be evolving more towards planetary and global relationships, we're not fully there yet. And within early communities, it will be important to establish the right structure, division of labor for that number of people as well. So what about the desired personality of the initial settlers or crew? Well, a meta-analysis of 73 studies suggested that adaptability attributes for ice environments may include intelligence, emotional stability, self-control, openness, optimism, mastery, being self-autonomous, so you can work alone, you are decisive, you have low need for social support. And so perhaps someone that is more introverted might be suitable. It's debatable, but there are important questions to consider. Flexibility, resilience, and hardiness. People that are flexible, who are stable, able to mentally or emotionally cope with crisis and return to baseline relatively quickly, and think about problems outside of the box in novel and creative ways would be important. And of course, past experience of isolated and confined environments. So people that can not only cope, but potentially flourish in ice environments. And we do, there are people like that out there. Of course, beliefs are really important too. So what are the belief systems and cultures and values that will be driving those early settlers? They will have their own personal ones, but what about the team beliefs and cultures and values, and how will they guide people and promote team cohesion? So thinking about compassion, empathy, efficiency and exploration, but also thinking about ideas like the overview effect. In trying to cement bonds and bringing people together. So will it be an disciplinary crew? Will it be mixed genders? There's research to suggest that female crew members can diffuse conflict, better than men. Would we have a neurodiverse team where we bring different experiences and different ways of processing information and solving problems, or a neuroconvergent team? And should a psychologist or a mental health expert be on this initial team? What other crew members, what will the other roles of the crew members be, and what functions will they have? There might be a chef, there may be a psychologist, a mental health expert, there may be an engineer, a scientist. What will be the important roles in those early days of settling into a new Martian or extraterrestrial environment? Of course, training will be invaluable to adjust. How long have I got? I just want to check on time. I don't have the time on.
I'm afraid that you have to go to the conclusions. We don't have more time.
Okay, so it's just 5 minutes, or?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So we also need to consider the fact that the crew will be responding to existential factors and crisis. And so what does history tell us? On a more pessimistic outlook, of course, humans are also known to overcome adversity and challenges. But on a more sort of pessimistic outlook, could you tell me when the 5 minutes is up so that I can just stop?
Yes.
Thank you so much. We have these two demonstrations of, as I said, the more extreme demonstrations of how human beings might respond to extreme environments that present an immediate risk to their survival. So on the left is a image from a film about Franklin's Lost Expedition, which was a British voyage of Arctic exploration led by Sir John Franklin. Basically the voyage departed from England in 1845 on board 2 ships and traveled to the unnavigated sections of the Northwest Passage in the Canadian Arctic. It met with disaster, and all the crew actually perished because they became icebound, and also because they were contaminated by tinned foods that they had ate. But the severe isolation, apparently, from what we understand, caused a lot of interpersonal challenges and issues. Some of it's been exaggerated because of, we're not sure exactly what happened, but this is what people think. And of course, there's also other isolation experiments like the British sea forts or other sea forts. In the UK, at least a dozen of these sea fortresses were constructed around the British Isles in the Thames Estuary during the Second World War to protect important ports and shipping channels. And one of these forts was called Monsall Forts, named after the designer Guy Monsall. Living conditions were extreme, and during the war, it is likely that around 100 soldiers would be stationed on these forts for 10 weeks at a time, with only, actually, I think it's less than 10 weeks, but with only a brief departure for rest. And this led to psychiatric issues, and they needed psychological intervention afterwards. It's important to think about the salutogenic factors as well. I'm not going to go into that, but we want to think about the positive aspects of spaceflight. So the overview effect, what elicits high morale, activities and factors that help with overall adjustment. So exercise, viewing the Earth, meaningful work, working as a team, sleep, beauty and wonderment. So that will be important in terms of future work. So I'm not going to go into this, but this gives you a bit of an idea of some of the countermeasures that have been initiated, and they're various in forms. Of course, extended reality, AI, trying to elicit torpor states for people while they're going on the outbound journey, as well as multisensory experiences, video logs, and so on and so forth. And of course, multisensory experiences that can help the people settle into their environment, because they will not have the same access to light, weather, and all of the sensory stimuli that we have here on Earth. So it would be important to try to stimulate the senses and regulate and calm as well the body and the nervous system. So I think I'll use this as the final slide, and then I'll stop. In relation to permanent migration, the initial adaptation and adjustment period will be challenging. Some of the aforementioned psychological and health countermeasures will help support this adjustment. However, traveling beyond the moon to other celestial bodies in the solar system, such as Mars, will require consideration of the evolution of species, including the human species, and adaptation processes that optimize the survival. Migration to Mars will eventually lead to changes in the structure of human beings. How can we evolve beyond our current state? Can we evolve beyond our current state? What are the limitations? Homo sapiens are a remarkable species and cooperative, resilient, flexible, and adaptable most of the time. Our ingenuity and cooperation in larger groups have helped us survive wars, ice ages, and global catastrophes. And perhaps our unique characteristics and qualities will do the same for us off-world. Advances of brain-computer interfaces, such as Neuralink, biogenetics, and genetic engineering, could lead to new technologies that erase unwanted mutations encoded in human genomes and create organic limbs and organs, and eventually genetically modified human beings, and lead to eventually genetically modified human beings. How will that affect culture, and how will that affect our identity and who we are and our capabilities? Biological integration of AI and computing software can optimize human capabilities and adaptive strategies. Birthing perhaps humanoids and AI human hybrids. Some of AI human hybrids, with artificial limbs in some ways already exist. I'm not going to go into all of these these images.
You must conclude, please.
No, that's it. We're concluding. So I'm going to stop, but that gives you an image of all the different sort of organisms, and including humans, that are adapting and have adapted to harsh environments, and how we can draw from them. So I think I'm going to stop there in terms of I've already gone over, so I'll stop there, but thank you for the time, and sorry that I've gone over.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you. You gave us a very useful information. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Marie-Louise Heuser's paper will focus on creatio ex zero, the vacuum and the blackness of the universe in philosophy and art. Marie-Louise, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy that the Moon Village Association and the Space Renaissance International have now a collaboration, so we can perhaps elaborate more concepts. I try to, yes, I have it. No, okay. Can you see it?
Yes, please.
Okay. When Jeff Bezos flew with his Blue Origin to space, he had on board also a space tourist named William Shatner. And William Shatner described his experience as a horrible experience, because he described the black sky or the black space as an experience of death. And so I was in a reaction of this a bit motivated to make here this lecture about creatio ex zero, the vacuum and the blackness of outer space in philosophy and art, because I think it is perhaps important to look to the tradition of this theme to get a broader conception perhaps of this whole field. This theme creatio ex zero is only a part of my research work, and was a reaction of this experience of William Shatner. I would like to start with a few child philosophical sentences from my daughters when they were very young. Helene, age 7, my head is a globe. Johanna, age 5, when everything dies, God makes everything grow. Oh, sorry, I have a problem with my slides. I cannot see my slides, sorry. Oh, okay, I think now I have the.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, now I can see my own slide, sorry. I would like to start with a few child philosophical sentences from my daughters when they were very young. Helene, age 7, my head is aglow. Johanna, age 5, when everything dies, God makes everything grow again. Helene, yes, of course. If God didn't let everything regrow, he wouldn't be there anymore. Creatio ex nihilo, creatio ex zero. I begin with two definitions. Creatio ex nihilo is meant as a creation out of nothing. This radically new conception of cosmogony was elaborated in early Christianity in distinction from antiquity by the patristics in the 2nd century. Creatio ex zero means an innerworldly, secularized creation from a primordial zero where there is no matter or bodies yet. Epistemologically, the non-representability, the pre-conceptual, and the non-sayable is the outcome of this. Here you have some philosophers of this conception of natura naturans and human creativity with respect to creatio ex zero. Nikolaus von Kues, Giordano Bruno, Johannes Kepler, Friedrich Wilhelm Joseph Schelling. Romantic views, for example, Christian Samuel Weiss, and modern theories of self-organization, for example, Hermann Haken's synergetics. I cannot give you a description of this complex philosophical systems, but you can find some of my publications on this themes here on Wikipedia. Here's my outline. I will focus on the Renaissance, the Romanticism, the avant-garde of the early 20th century in Germany and in Russia, and on the avant-garde of the 1950s and 1960s with Yves Klein, the Zero Group, and Charles Wilp. I have not much time. I had the information, or I became the information that I have 20 minutes. So it is only a very, very brief overview. In the Renaissance, there was created a new philosophy of space against the peripatetic scholastic horror vacui conception. And this new philosophy had as an invention the empty space, the vacuum. And the empty space, the vacuum, means freedom and infinity, new possibilities in this new conceptions of philosophy. And here you have a quote of Giordano Bruno out of his De Immenso from 1591. There can be an infinite number of things come into existence in this great space, and yet they think this world here is enough. And you can see here on the right a German woodcut of the 1920s. Giordano Bruno undertook a lot of space travels with the wings of the spirit to the moon, to other planets, and also to other stars. And here you have a quote from 1591 again. Can you get there with the wings of the spirit? Where to go the feet do not carry us? Well then, first of all, imagine, if you don't want to reveal that it really is, I also say invent. You leave the earth and fly straight to the near moon. Here we have a creative imagination of the Copernican turn, and perhaps a very early first overview effect with respect to Earth. In Romanticism, the concept of creatio ex nihilo beziehungsweise creatio ex zero was combined with Naturphilosophie, with natural philosophy, and there some conceptualized or postulated hypothetically a first matter-antimatter reaction. Christian Samuel Weiss, founder of a mathematical theory of crystallization and crystal systems, that means an a priori theory to capture the countless possible empirical crystal forms, wrote 1804, the whole nature can be thought as a development of opposite magnitudes, in the poor sense of mathematics from zero. One must not attribute an absolute existence to any matter. Each is nothing but a magnitude, a pole which is separated from its opposite, and exists in general only in the separation. And it was a thought which Kant, or Immanuel Kant, already grasped, that all matters, the whole universe summed up, would give to the facet zero. Yes, zero. In his 1810 lectures, Christian Samuel Weiss hypothetically postulated matter-antimatter reactions, and gave some examples, but I want not to go to this detail. In Weimar, Germany, we had a great space enthusiasm. And you can see here two works of Max Valier. One is The Advance into Space, a Technical Possibility. And this book had 6 editions from 1924 to 1930. And the other was a science fiction story on a bold journey to Mars from 1927. And in this story, he described the psychological concept of space madness, which can occur during longer space journeys like to Mars. And here the picture on the right is out of the Advance into Space. I go now to the Russian avant-garde. Kazimir Malevich created his Black Square, 1913, and you can see here a version which is which can be found in Moscow, and this is a version from 1915. And this Black Scare is considered to be the icon of modernism, and it was the first radical abstract painting. And the central concepts of Kazimir Malevich were the liberation of nothingness and also the creation ex zero. Kazimir Malevich wrote in his Bauhaus book of 1927, The Non-Objective World, I feel myself transported into an abysmal wasteland where one feels around oneself the creative points of the universe. And this painting is also from Hino here on the right side. And he created some interspherical suprematist satellites. And this here is also a version from 1927. In the avant-garde of the 1950s, 1960s, sorry, we can find a broad celebration of cosmic emptiness. Here you see an exhibition of an empty space from 1958 in Paris from Yves Klein. And on the right side, the legendary famous jump of Yves Klein into the void in Paris 1960. And in the 1950s and 1960s, we have another great group of avant-garde persons, the Zero Group. The Zero Group was founded in Düsseldorf in Germany and was also spread in Italy, France, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and Belgium. And there you can find a celebration of emptiness and of space travel. Here you can see a sentence or two sentences of the manifest, and you can read this in Otto Piene's Astronauts of Inner Space from 1966. Otto Piene was one of the founders of the Zero Group, and he wrote, from the beginning, we understood zero as a name for a zone of silence and new possibilities, not as an expression of nihilism or Dada-like gag. We thought of it as a countdown before a rocket launch. Zero is an immeasurable zone where an old state transitions into an unknown new one. And here you have one of the paintings of Heinz Mack. Heinz Mack was also a founder of this Zero Group, together with Günter Uecker. Also Otto Piene, Heinz Mack, and Günter Uecker were the founders of this Zero Group in Düsseldorf. And this painting he made in the Sahara desert and named it The Night of the Desert from 1981. And there's also a work of Heinz Mack named Light Sculpture in the Desert from 1973. And here is one of Heinz Mack with a title, Heaven in the Earth in Heaven. I think this is also a very nice picture which shows the interrelation between heaven and earth. And here is it the earth which is black. You can see here on the buff the triangle which is black. This is the earth in the mirror. The German Zero movement had close connections to the Russian movement of suprematism, especially Malevich. You can see here the studio of Otto Piene in Düsseldorf, and here you can see also the black square in several forms. What is perhaps also interesting in this field is that in Germany, that also in Germany and in Russia, in the early 20th century, I think the first half of the 20th century, you had not only an avant-garde movement or several avant-garde movements, but also a connection to rocket science. In Russia, it was the famous Tsiolkovsky, to whom the avant-gardists in Russia related, and in Germany it was Hermann Obert and several others who led the foundation for first experiments on rocket techniques. And this was also broadened by the film of Fritz Lang, Woman in the Moon, from 1929, where also Albert Einstein was sitting and was happy about this film. Here you have last but not least, a picture of Charles Webb, of the UFO on the roof of the house of Charles Webb in Düsseldorf, Germany. And in this UFO, Andy Warhol and Christo and other artists elaborated on artworks in 1970. Charles Webb was named as an astronaut. I think he was the first astronaut, and this term astronaut was patented. I think that's the right English word, I don't know. And he made a lot of exhibitions to space art and had close connections to the ESA and the German Aerospace Society. And I think he was also the first who had an artwork in the orbit. He had there an artwork in the Mir, in the Russian Mir, and he was also I think the first who proposed an Academy of Arts as a module of the ISS. At the at the Technical University of Braunschweig, we organized an exhibition in 2008 with works of Charles Wilp. And there were also the managers of Volkswagen, because Charles Wilp made the famous slogan to the VW, to the Volkswagen, he runs and runs and runs and runs. Perhaps you know it. And here's my conclusion. To create Creatio ex zero, the vacuum and the blackness of outer space in philosophy and art. Creatio ex zero means the creative beginning, which is not derivable from something previous. The emptiness and blackness of space was understood as space of new possibilities and not as death. And the meaning of life was understood as the development of everyone's creative potential. And for this, free spaces are necessary, and outer space offers many opportunities for this activities. And I think that that the cultural dimension of space travel is so important, because the avant-garde shows that we need new spaces, new empty spaces to realize our potential and to realize our creativity. From the Zero Group, you can also learn lightness, joy, and pleasure, because this group also was famous for his happenings and for his joyful togetherness. Thank you for your attention. If you want to ask me something or give some more hints, you can write me a letter, an email to mlhäuser@gmx.net. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria Luise. It was a very clear and brilliant presentation.
Yes, 20 minutes. As you said.
Thank you. And now, Arthur, please take the lead and let's start with the comments and questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much to all of the speakers. I think we had a very informative and inspiring session here. Actually, in the chat and in the question and answers, I do not have any questions from the audience at the moment, but maybe some of the panelists would have a question for one of the speakers. We would have maybe a minute or two for that. I don't see anybody. Yes.
Yeah, I had a question for Marie-Louise. A very interesting commentary on blackness and, a counterpoint to Shatner's reaction. I wonder if you could speculate a little bit on what your research means for, again, let's imagine a community living on the far side of the moon. They would see it all the time, this darkness, the sky, the infinite possibilities. And how do you think their culture would evolve?
Oh, yes, thank you for the question. I think that space and especially the dark side of the moon. Sorry.
Could you stop sharing your screen, because you're still sharing?
Okay.
Sorry for disturbing.
Okay. I don't know.
On the bottom of your screen, you should have a red button. Stop sharing.
Okay, I might can. Is it right? So, fine. Yes, I know. Yes. Okay. Now I have it. Sorry, I'm not so often in the Zoom meetings. Okay. Thank you for the question. I think that the experience in space and in on the dark side of the moon is a great possibility for philosophy to expand the whole tradition of speculative and also spiritual lines of thinking. And I think perhaps the astronauts or the space tourists should have a bibliography or bibliography of philosophical works. I think that this could deepen the experience, because my personal view is that it is not enough only to look at the dark sky and only to look at the Earth from the outside, but it is also, I think, important, yes, to have the theoretical concepts which were created in the tradition since antiquity, or perhaps no longer, also not also longer before, which can enrich the experience of this black sky and this black universe. And perhaps it is not only the an existential or a new existentialism, perhaps, which is arising here with this, or is one of the viewpoints of philosophical concepts here, but I think also the more spiritual ones have a chance to be reflected. And perhaps one sentence to phenomenology. So phenomenology. My English is not so well, sorry. I think only also the phenomenological philosophy, also from Husserl and Heidegger and also Hannah Arendt and also French school, Derrida, Sartre, and so on. They have a focus on the given, on the given phenomenon, and because of this, yes, focusing, they had no interest in the sky so long. And I think this was a great work of you to open up this field of yes, the outer space to phenomenology. And because in the tradition of philosophy, you have always the reflection on the universe and of outer space and of our position in the universe, and the anthropology is full of cosmic relations. It's not a new theme, but the new is that we have now a new experience. But I think this new experience of outer space would have to be combined and interrelated with our knowledge, our theoretical thinking, because it's not enough only to look in the black sky of
Thank you. Well said.
So thank you very much. I have one question in the chat, and it's from Julio Prisco, and he has a comment for Frank White. Can one experience the deep space effect, and he calls it the cosmic overview effect, also from the Earth, down from the planet, looking up at the stars at night? He feels he does it all of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I was thinking about it as we were talking about the deep space effect. And you can experience most of it. I mean, in fact, if you think about it, we talk about seeing the Earth from a distance. And that is uniquely reserved for astronauts, because think about it, we don't see the Earth from a distance. Those of us who are on the surface, we don't experience what I call the overview effect. However, if we look at the night sky, I think we begin to get a hint of what's being called the deep space effect. What I would distinguish, though, is if you listen to the astronauts that I featured, they do talk about the fact that they're outside the atmosphere. The stars aren't blinking. You can see the colors of the stars. You can see that some are closer than others. And there's another phenomenon that I cannot explain yet. Some astronauts talk about Earth is not black. I mean, space is not black. There's so many stars that you can see that it's more like it's white. And then other people talk about the blackness of space. This is a contradiction that we haven't sorted out yet. But my answer is, great question. I think you can get a real feel for universal insight or deep space effect from the Earth. But you will not get the entire experience. And there's one other variable that you don't have, and Anahita talked about this. You're not experiencing zero gravity or reduced gravity. I do believe reduced gravity enhances the visual experience in ways we don't yet understand.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we probably need to move on to Adriano's comments.
Giuseppe raised a hand.
Okay, well.
Ladies first, Anita first. Ladies first.
That's very
Yes.
kind of you.
Sure.
The question for everyone, really. So, in relation to human consciousness, one of the fundamental things that we understand about it, we don't understand too much about it from as far as I can tell, is this idea of object relations. So we're tethered to the Earth and we rely on object relations to make sense of the world, but also not to have a complete breakdown of mental states in a sense. And my question is, when we occupy these sort of liminal spaces between subject and object, as well as when we go out to deep space, where perhaps beyond the moon, how might that affect beyond the evolution? So the evolution of consciousness will take time. How will that affect the human psyche, which is what I tried to convey some of the aspects of that in my presentation, but it's a question to all the experts and perhaps the attendees in terms of what can happen and how might we experience a complete breakdown of consciousness, and because of the lack of stimuli that will be around us, certainly on barren landscapes in deep space. I don't know if that was a clear question, but I'll send that out to anyone that wants to talk about that.
I'll take a shot at that. I think
I silenced the crowd. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll just say briefly, I think it's very wise to send astronomers on these missions, because going back to that earlier question, they're very used to looking at the sky. They're very used to looking out into the universe. And they might be psychologically prepared in ways that others are not. Jeff Hoffman is the only astronomer I know of who's ever become an astronaut. It's not a typical career path. It's, you know, it's definitely, it's worth thinking about, because you're right. The sense of being out there swimming in the universe, for Mike Fossum, it was thrilling, but for some other people, it might be kind of like what it'd be like to be out in the middle of the ocean and you see no land masses, and it could be very disorienting.
I have also a question.
So the question is looking, trying to explore, because as human beings, we are accustomed, and our DNA, our very makeup, is used to being on Earth habitats and relating to objects within Earth habitats that we're familiar with, and interpreting and processing those stimuli in a way to our locked out brains to make sense of the external world. However, with drastic shifts in terms of the stimuli that we're presented with, so when we go on deep space missions, where we're traveling, as Frank said, out into deep space and this deep ocean of stars and blackness, it's a very different environment. And so the stimuli, the same stimuli won't be there. And so how will that affect the human psyche and how we process, interpret, and make sense of the world? And could that lead to a disruption in processes and mental health issues potentially as a result in terms of outcome? And I hope that's clearer, Marie.
Well, I think if I may, because probably you want to then come to some wrap up, because we are probably nearly half an hour.
I have one question. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I have one question to Frank White. You focus on consciousness in your Cosma hypothesis, and but I think that the balancing the floating between conscious and unconsciousness, also consciousness and unconsciousness, is the main figure of artistic work. The creative processes are not only conscious in the consciousness, but there are also including unconsciousness. So that this was my point in my lecture. I could not really evolve it or really fully describe it, but I think that the relationship between human beings and the universe is on a deeper ground. It is related to the in German you say Urgrund, to the primordial substance, and not to only to concepts or to theories or to the higher cognitive functions. And I think yes, I think perhaps you have also to include this perspective.
That's a great point. I'll try to deal with that in the future. Thank you. I will say, since we don't have much time, it's really interesting, and it hasn't been examined closely. The astronauts on the International Space Station spontaneously make art and music. They're not sent there to do it. But if you study what happens on the ISS, they're all sent there to do cognitive work, science, technology, and yet on their own, really without any support or encouragement, they start bands, they play the bagpipes, they paint. And I think it's the unconscious reaction to the environment through art that you're talking about. And I'll just leave it at that because time is short, but I think you're right.
Okay, thanks.
Can I just say just a very brief point, and of course I leave it, of course, to Adriano, I guess, as to conclude. I just have a couple of comments. First of all, I think this was an excellent starting. I just want to bring two aspects that they have not been. The moon is a test bed for everything. And just a practical example is people want to go to Mars, but there is no place to simulate what the astronaut will have to bear when basically looking to the empty space for 7 months. There is no space. So if you go around the moon or if you are around the Earth, you will always see the Earth. The only place which really simulate interplanetary mission is the dark side of the moon. So I think, I don't know how many people have realized it is not a big discovery, but nevertheless, I think given the fact that the moon is a laboratory for testing on technology, but also on the psychological as well as all other aspects, we should bring this element, which is probably never been discussed before. There's a lot of discussion about training astronauts for long mission because of the radiation and so forth, but on the psychology, to stay on the dark side of the moon, there will be no substitute for an astronaut which wants to go to the moon, to stay few months on the other side of the moon in order to really start to fear what it is, also because the advantage is not very far. It's just on the other side of the moon, that is not few millions kilometers away. So this is a very practical aspect. The other aspect that I think there is a red fil rouge, as we say in French, that brings all the different aspects. So there is the physical, psychological aspect, there is the cultural aspect, there is how to consider, but the other aspect that we need to bring, and that's why I really hope that this is the beginning of a more, let's say, a comprehensive assessment of all these aspects, is the fact that basically we need to get also some added value for the Earth out of the deep space effect. And I think we can find, we need, of course, to do research on what can be done on the moon, from the moon, but it's also try to relate it to what's happening here. So just leave it there. These are just questions that maybe we need to address, and maybe somebody will have to start to bring all these elements together and maybe eventually start, as I said in my introduction, do something on all these different aspects. Sorry that I took so long, but this was some practical suggestion for the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Adriano, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, I want to thank very much the speakers for your beautiful lectures, quite informative and educational. Yeah, very much. And I also want to thank the organizer, Remo, and the staff of Moon Village Association for organizing this webinar. Last but not least, thank you for giving to me the responsibility to try to draw some conclusions of this beautiful day. And I would say this is a mission impossible. However, I took some notes during the different speeches, and at the end, I was surprised to see that my notes were trying to go to some conclusion. So I will now tell you what are my notes. First of all, the question by Frank at the beginning: what is our added value to Cosmos? What are we bringing to Cosmos that is useful? And I will say we should make a human revolution in Cosmos beyond the ferocious laws of nature, because we are humans. We can think, we can have a rational thinking, and this is our responsibility to try to organize life in a better way when we think about killing and exploiting and all these kind of things that are our natural heritage. We have to go over that to become really humans, and we can become really humans only in space because of the abundant resources of the solar system. So this is, I think, the first important concept that came to my mind during this lecture. The second point is the Giordano Bruno concept that was recalled also by Marie-Louise, that the sun is just a star among billions of other stars in the universe, and the universe is homogeneous. The Earth is not the planet, something very different from the rest of the solar system. No, it is a planet. And by the way, we are living on this planet. But this doesn't mean that we cannot go outside and develop our civilization in the solar system and beyond. So, two reactions to the deep space effects. First reaction is to close ourselves inside Earth as a shelter, because people see the Earth is a small ball in the immense vastity of the universe, and the first reaction is fear. So let's stay inside and then take care of this small ball and so on. And this is the so-called spaceship Earth concept. Okay, we are astronaut on spaceship Earth, but that is not true, because Earth is not going anywhere, because the universe is expanding, therefore it is growing like a cake in the oven, and we are not traveling. Earth is not traveling to some other place. If we want to travel, we have to build our spaceships. This is also okay. Every time I listen to this concept of a spaceship Earth, I shut my mouth and I renounce to make this precisation. But I think in this discussion of today, it is also important to make this small but important difference. So the first reaction is, oh, we are so small and we have to stay here. The second reaction is we have to go and to expand outside, to manage and master the solar system, and to become capable to face the threats, the cosmic threats, and the endogenous threats that we have on Earth as a planet, and the cosmic threats from Earth, from the killing asteroids and other things, and solar flares and a lot of things. So only going outside we can grow in our knowledge and our capability to manage our environment, because our environment is not only Earth, but is also the rest of the solar system. So the second reaction is more functional, more useful to civilization survival and grow and keep on growing it. Okay, the last point is a very, very key question. When we go outside, when we expand, should we engineering ourselves or the environment? It will be too easy to reply both. If we are humanist, we shall take a position, because it's not the same thing and not at the same time. So there is no doubt that expanding, we will change. Our physiology will change and so on. But we should know now, take present this point, that space madness is a possibility. As Anahita mentioned in her presentation, our psychology is very fragile. We are not that strong from the point of view of our mind, and if we think what it would be to find ourselves in a new environment, completely new, completely built up by ourselves, by our technology, only so all this kind of thing could easily drive people to some kind of madness. Now, we could also say, okay, this is not a problem because madness is the mother of invention. So in order to have creativity, we need a certain percentage of mad people. Yes, but a certain percentage, not the majority. So we also need, when we will live in space, we also need a place where we can stay with our nature and recognize ourselves in a mirror. Think what it would be to change our shape, not only physiology, but shape, no, too quickly, I mean. Think about, to make a comparison, when you are out of your home for a congress, so you go around the whole day talking, listening to other people to talk, trying to focus on what are the concepts that you are listening and trying to explain and so on. What do you need at the end, in the evening? You need your room. In the hotel, when you can undress, you can stay with yourself, with your nature. So I think the same thing we need in space. We need a place where, as much as possible, our Earth environment will be reproduced. And this for many years, many decades, and maybe centuries, because I repeat, we will change, but it is better to change very, very slowly. This is my opinion from my humanist point of view. So yes, shape and physiological conditions are important also for the mind, as the Oriental philosophies teach us, like yoga and Buddhism and other Oriental philosophy teach us something about the connection between our physical system and our mind system. So conclusion, the best model is the on-air one, where we can have a simulated gravity, and we can have, of course, protection. Protection from radiation, we need it everywhere, of course, because we cannot think what it could be, what our DNA will do if we will be exposed to the cosmic radiation. So we need protection, but we also need a green environment. The third element is the green environment in our habitats. So we can have a possibility to keep our mind sanity, or even to improve it, get into a new cultural development, as we said before. Okay. So I know this is not a conclusion, and for sure I am not giving a good appreciation, enough appreciation of your all the concepts that were exposed here, but this is what it came to my mind today. Thank you again, everybody, for being.
Thank you, everybody. I think that we should finish here. I hope we'll have another opportunity in the future to go deeper into this very interesting issue. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
It was a pleasure.